Today's daf, Bez Hashem, is Masechta Menachos Daf Kuf, number 100. And here we go. We're going to start from the Mishnah on Daf Tzadik Testament Bay. So we're going to make it very big. And okay, let's just bring this up a little bit. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Second. Okay, so we learned yesterday that in the vestibule, which is on your picture over here, they had a shulchan, two tables over there. So the Mishnah is going to discuss what those two tables were. Shnei shulchanos hoya ba'ulam. There were two tables in the vestibule before the sanctuary. Mibifnim al pesach habayis. When you enter the sanctuary. Echad shel shayish, one was like silver, looked like stone. Echad shel zahav, and one looked like gold. Al shel shayish, the one that looked like silver, noisnim lechem haponim bichnisase. So on Shabbos morning, they put the new breads onto that silver after they baked it, and they put it onto that table as a waiting place. The al shel zahav, but on the gold one, BC asai, they use the gold one for holding the breads that you took off the table. In other words, once they're going to remove on the main table, which was in the Beis Hamikdash, on the main table, they're going to remove the old bread. So you can't eat it right away. You have to makriv on the mizbeach, the two spoons. So they put it on the table that was in this vestibule, and it was on the holding table. Now, why was one made of gold and one made of silver? So the Mishnah says, that you go up in holiness, and then you put it down. So therefore, the one that was when you take the freshly baked bread, you put it onto the silver table, and then from the silver table, you're going to eventually bring it onto the main table, which was made of gold. So you're going up from silver to gold. The echad, says the Mishnah, shel zahav mi b'fnim, the one that was from gold, that was more on the inner, the main table, so that's the third table. So two in the vestibule, and there's one in the main sanctuary, that was made of gold. She'olav lechem haponim tamid. On that table, they had the lechem upon him, the 12 breads, always was on the table. Now, the Torah tells you that the breads should be tamid, always on the table. So what the Mishnah is going to describe, a process of how they always made sure that there was bread on the table. So what happened? On Shabbos morning, there were 4 kahanim that entered with breads. Shnayim biyadim shnei sedarim. 2 of them carried the 2 stacks of bread. So each, let's say, carried 6 loaves of bread. Ushnayim, and 2 of the kahanim, 2 of the 4, biyadam, in their hands, shnei bazichim, had the 2 spoons of frankincense. Now, the abba makdimin lifneihem, but there were other 4 people who came, who were already at the table. Shnayim, 2 of them, litel shnei sedarim, they were already removing the old breads. Ushnayim, and 2 of them were taking litel shnei bazichim, taking the 2 spoons. So how did they do it? So basically what the Mishnah is going to describe, as they're pulling away the old bread, the other person was pushing in the other side, the other kohen on the opposite side of the table was pushing in the new bread. The guys carrying the new bread stood in the north. Upneim Ladarim was facing the south. The ones that were pulling the old bread out, Oimdim Bedarim, stood in the south. Upneim Betzafin, they're facing the north. Elu Moishchem, the people pulling the old bread, the Elu Manichem, and the other ones was placing the new bread at the same time. And the backs of the breads, of the old bread versus the new bread, were touching each other. Shenema, the pasuk says, "L'fanai tamid," that there always was supposed to be bread on the table. So that is the opinion of the Tanakama, that there wasn't a moment where there was when the bread were not on the table. Rabbi Yaisi says, "Afilu elu noitlim be'elu manichem," even if one took the breads and the others placed the breads, even though it was not exactly at the same time, that is considered constant, even if it didn't happen at the same time. Anyway, the people carrying the old breads, Yatsru, they came out and went back to the vestibule. Unasonim al Shulchan Azav, there was another gold table there, Shaya Ba'ulam, that was in the vestibule. And it was made out of gold, not silver, because it just came off a gold table. You're not going to put it on a silver table. So that table, the holding table, had to be made out of gold. And because the Kahanim could not eat the breads right away. Once they were maktir the 2 spoons of frankincense, then the Kahanim got their share of the chalas. Now, says the Mishnah, Chol Yom HaKippurim Liyos b'Shabbos. If Yom Kippur fell out on Shabbos, so when you remove the old bread, you can't eat it because it's Yom Kippur that day. Well, the breads are eaten that day and at night. So therefore, hachalas mischalkos le'erev. So matzah Yom Kippur, which is matzah Shabbos, they would divide up the chalas at nighttime. Now the Mishnah says, but chol is be'erev Shabbos. If, let's say, Yom Kippur fell out on Friday, it can't, but it could in the time of the Mishnah. So it fell out. Let's say Yom Kippur fell out on Friday. So Ir Shel Yom Kippurim, the chatas of Yom Kippur, right? Not the Sarah Nasa B'fnim, but let's say the Musaf of Yom Kippur, which was a goat. The meat of the goat technically should have been eaten that day, on Friday. The problem is it's Yom Kippur on Friday, so they have to eat it at night. Now Chol Erev, they eat at night. The problem with eating that goat meat on Friday night is that you're not going to cook it. It's going to have to be eaten raw. So the Mishnah says, which Kahanim are going to eat raw meat? So the Mishnah says, V'habavliyim, the Kahanim that came from Bavel, and the Mishnah says it like in a derogatory term, those primitive Kahanim from Bavel, they could eat anything. So they're not so particular. So they would eat the raw meat in order for it not to turn nicer. So not every Kohen participated to eat that goat from Yom Kippur when Yom Kippur was on a Friday. Only the special Kahanim who could eat raw meat and don't have a problem with that. Tanya, now the Gemara extends the fact of Tamid to another situation of Tamid, which means the Torah, it says in Tanakh that you're supposed to learn day and night. So first the Mishnah says like this. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa. Rabbi Yaisi says, Afilu silek esa yeshana shacharis, v'sida esa chadasha arvis. Even if you took the old bread in the morning and put the new bread at night, there's no problem with that. Elamani mekayim lefonai tamid. What does it mean that the breads have to be there constantly? So it doesn't go overnight without a bread, but it doesn't mean that the breads are there all the time. So you could so Amar Rabami, so Rabami extends the teachings of Rabbi Yaisi to another situation. From the words of Rabbi Yaisi, we can learn that the problem is like this. A person who has to make a living has no time to learn, okay? He has no time to learn. So, but the Torah tells you that you have to learn. You should be learning all day. So from the words of Rabbi Yaisi, we can understand that even if you learned one chapter, let's say of Mishnayos in the morning or one chapter at night, kiyam mitzvahs, you mekayim the mitzvah of layomash sefer Torah zemepicha, that you learn the whole day, because the fact is that the Torah says that when you're making a living, you're exempt from learning Torah, but you still could be mekayim the mitzvah of tamid, of learning constantly, if when you have the free time, you're learning in the morning, a little bit at night, and that's okay. He says, he goes even lighter. Shimon ben Yochai said, you don't even have to learn Mishnayos. Even if you only read Kriya Shema in the morning, at night, you're mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. The davazeh also la'omer b'fnei amoritz. You can't say that to an amoritz, well, because somebody who says, "Oh, you could be yaitze with kriyash ma'shachas and avos," so he's going an amoritz is going to say, "Why am I going to spend and send my son to expensive tuition school yeshiva? Send him to public school." And what about Talmud Torah? He'll learn Krishma and Shachris and Arvis. That's so you don't tell this halacha to an Amoritz. Rava says mitzvah la'omer b'fnei Amoritz. You could tell it to him for an Amoritz because the message that the Amoritz is going to get is just the opposite. If with Krishma, Shachris, and Arvis you get the mitzvah of layomer sefer Torah zamapicha, certainly if you're going to be learning a whole day, you get even more of a mitzvah. The Gemara says, Shaul ben Dama ben Achosis Rabbi Yishmael as Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael had a nephew called Ben Dama, and he asked him a question. He asked him an interesting question that could go, if the Torah meant that you're supposed to learn Kol Torah Kula, it's not so big. It's Shas, all the Tanakh, Halacha, and you're pretty much done. So, Kagoin Ani, Shulamadidi Kol Torah Kula, I learned the entire the Torah. Can I learn Greek wisdom? Sciences. So Kara love Hamikra Azes, Rabbi Shmuel says you're not allowed to. The Torah tells you, the Tanakh tells you, learn all day, and you should not stop learning, and you should meditate it on the Torah day and night. If you find a time that's not daytime and not nighttime, go learn Greek sciences. So there is no such a thing. So therefore, he didn't give him the permission. And this argument, all these people, all the Tanoim are arguing Reb Shmuel ben Nachmenu, because till now we're learning when the Tanakh says was a halacha to everybody, that every person has an obligation to learn all day. So Rabbi Yonis said no. This is pasuk zeh einay loy mkoivev loy mitzvah. It's not an obligation, not a mitzvah. Ella baracha. It's only a blessing. In other words, pasuk was specifically said and only to Yahushua. Ra Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yeshua. Hakadosh Baruch Hu saw Yahushua shedivrei Torah chavivim ola b'yosa. Shenama mashasa Yeshua benum nar leyom shtachaya. Yeshua had this affection to the Torah more than anybody else because he's always around Moshe Rabbeinu. Amalei Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yeshua kol kach chavivim lecha divrei Torah. You love Torah so much. Layamer sefer zayah Torah mepicha. Then Hashem blessed you that may you never forget your learning. So so it's a blessing. It's not an obligation to learn every second. Tana debei Rabbi Yishmael. In the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, they taught divrei Torah lo yalecha choiva via Torah shoy lifter atzmechem. Basically, Torah should not be like an obligation that you have to. In other words, we're going to learn this way that you don't have to learn, 12 hours a day. But because you have to make a living, and derech eretz with Torah it doesn't go. But v'yata rishoy lifter atzmecha mehen. But you can't exempt yourself. I'm going to only make a living and not open a sefer. So you have to figure out a way to do both. Amar Chizkiah said, "My dixiv, what is the meaning of this pasuk? V'afa sischa mepitza rachav loy mutzak tachtel." HaKadosh Baruch Hu sometimes seduces a person from entering the small, narrow opening. What does that mean? A human being, when he seduces somebody, nothing good happens from it. Most people are trying to convince their friends to go from the ways of life to the ways of death. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu seduces you, will seduce a person from the ways of death to the ways of life. Shenema, va'av esischa mepitzar. HaKadosh Baruch Hu convinced you and seduced you to go away from the narrow opening. Why? What's called the narrow opening? Gehenim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu seduced you away from Gehenim. Shpiatzar. That the opening of Gehenim has a very narrow opening. Why is it so narrow? Sha'asunu tzavor b'soicha. We go to Achuf. that Kadosh Baruch Hu made the opening of Gehenna narrow opening so the smoke should not escape. So in addition to the heat of the fire, you can't breathe there because of the smoke. Figuratively. So you're going to tell me that just like the mouth of the opening of Gehenna is narrow, so also the whole Gehenna is narrow, and there's no room for anybody. God, it somehow expands, it'll get a little bit more crowded in there, but there's room for everybody. It's not like the jail system that's running out of space. It's not. That certain people don't go to Gehenna. Who is that? A guy who's a Talmud Chacham and somehow is not learning Torah. So Gehenna is not for him. For that type of king, Gehenna is prepared for. You're going to say, they run out of wood in Gehenna. There's plenty of the big fire and there's plenty of wood there. You're going to tell me that the reward of learning Torah is that it protects you from Gehenna, but that's it. Your table will be full of delicacies. So if you learn Torah, you're saved from Gehenna, and God gets you out of messes. And not only that, you're going to see your table full of bracha. Now we learned in the Mishnah, Kol Yom Kippurim Liyas B'Shabbat. Yom Kippur fell out on Shabbos. So the people that ate that goat, right? If Yom Kippur fell out on Friday and they ate the goat on Friday night, the Mishnah calls them Bavliim, the Kahanim that came from Bavel. So Rabbi Babachana, Rabbi Yochanan says, Loi Bavliim Haim. They weren't actually Babylonian Kahanim, Alexandrium Haim. They were from Alexandria. So why did the Mishnah, why did the Mishnah call them Bavliim? Because the people from Eretz Yisrael disliked Babylonian. The people from Israel hated the Babylonians because when the second Beis Hamikdash was being built, they didn't join up in helping with the building. They were happy in Bavel. Eventually, when the second Beis Hamikdash was built, they showed up and became serving in the Beis Hamikdash. So whenever they want to say something derogatory about a Kohen, they called them Babylonians, but really they were from Egyptians. They were from Alexandria. Tanya Nami, this is the same thing. Rabbi Yossi says, those Kahanim that could eat raw meat, loy Bavliim Haim, they weren't Bavel Kahanim, Alexandrium Haim, they were Alexandria Kahanim, the Egyptian Kahanim, as Bavliim, because the people in Eretz Yisrael who controlled the Beis Hamikdash hated Babylonian people, so they called these Kahanim that could eat raw meat Babylonians. Rabbi Yehuda said, you put me at ease, so God should put you at ease. Because Rabbi Yehuda was from Bavel, and he thought, Bavel people must be crass. So, but when he found out, Rabbi Yossi says they were not Babylonian people, they were Alexandrian people, Rabbi Yehuda felt a little better about that. The Mishnah says, see there, now the Mishnah is describing what it says in the Pasuk. The Pasuk says that the Lechem HaPanim had to be eaten, had to be on the table from Shabbos to the next Shabbos, 7 days and 8 nights. What happens? See, there's a lechem b'Shabbos, v'sabazichin la'achar Shabbos. You put the breads on the table on Shabbos, but you put the 2 spoons on Sunday. So the lechem is possible because the breads and the spoons have to be there for 7 days and 8 nights. The hikter is a bezichin b'Shabbos. So then you went the next Shabbos and were marked the spoons. Possible, the breads are possible, and therefore they're possible, the breads that cannot be eaten. So ein chayav mishum pigel noiser v'tamei. No halachas apply to those breads of pigel, noiser, and tamei, because once it's possible, disqualified breads, they cannot become eating. They're not kachim anymore because the breads are invalid, so they cannot kachim, so they can't become noiser, they can't become tamei, and they can't become pigel. Again, another mistake. See, there's a lechem Shabbos. You put the breads and the 2 spoons on Shabbos, but instead of being makter the bezichen on Shabbos, viktis a bezichen la'achar Shabbos. They will makter the bezichen on the mizbeach on Sunday. Psula, the bread's apostle. Again, the bread's apostle, so nothing. It's not like kachim that goes awry, and you could have pigel nice and tame. It's just pasula kachim, disqualified. Here, the Mishnah gives you an advice. Let's say you put the breads and the spoons on Sunday. So it's possible because the hiktas of bezichen b'Shabbos pesula, and you will makter the bezichen on Shabbos, so the breads are possible because the breads were not on the table for 7 days. It was started on Sunday. Keitzad Yasa, what should you do if you put the breads and the bezichen on Sunday? So then yanichenu the Shabbos haba, you let it stay on the table for 2 weeks. So the clock really starts ticking. Not on Sunday, but on the next Shabbos, on Shabbos morning, and then you leave it till the next Shabbos morning. Even if the breads remain on the table for 2 weeks, there's nothing wrong with that. It just has to be on the table 7 days, minimum of 7 days and 8 nights. However, the kedusha of the breads are only start on Shabbos. That's an important point. On Shabbos is when the kedusha of the bread starts. So if you put it there too early, there's no kedusha on those breads, and that's what the Gemara is going to discuss. Tanan Hassam, we learned in a Mishnah over there in Yoma, and basically it's discussing the Seder Hayom of Yom Kippur. Omalama Mamuna, the person in charge of the Beis Hamikdash, they wanted to know, can we start bringing the carbon atomid? So they didn't have a clock to see if it's the time, and the sky looked dark. So they would have somebody go up on the ladder to see if they could see some light on the horizon, and can we shech the carbon tamid? If it's actually he sees light, the person would say, Barkai, I see some light. Matis ben Yishmael oimer. Hey, call Mizrach. They ask him a question. Are you seeing a light from the entire eastern hemisphere? And he would say yes. And they would ask him, can you see that the sun, is started to come onto the city of Hebron? I see the sun over the city of Hebron. For some reason, they wanted to mention the city of Hebron prior to shechting the carbon tamid, because in Hebron is where the Avos HaKadoshim are buried. So that was a way of bringing out Chus Avos by just mentioning the city that they come from. Why did they need somebody to get on a ladder to get on it with a telescope to see if the light was lighting up, if the sun was lighting up already Hebron? Why can't they just look up in the sky, see if you could see some light? They saw the light of the moon. It was probably a cloudy day, and they saw the light of the moon. The dimu shahir mizrach, and they thought that was the light of the sun. So shachtu as a tamid, they shechted the tamid too early. But once you shechted the tamid too early, vaitziyah lebeisa sreifa, and they had to burn the tamid because it was shechted too early. After they already, so the Mishnah just continues. Varida kain lebeisa tefila, the kain gadol went to the mikvah. Anytime the Kohen Gadol had to use the bathroom and defecate, so he had to go back into the mikvah. If he just urinated, then he just needs to wash his hands and feet again. Fine. Now the Gemara says, the father Ravaman taught us, not only if you shech too early, you passel the carbon. Let's say there's a bird and it doesn't need shechting, but you did the malik at night, then it's passel. Let's say you did the kamitza, which is what I have over here in the picture. The person's doing a kamitza. If he did this at night, not during the daytime, so then the whole mincha is passel. So the Gemara says like this: if you shech the bird at night, Okay, I understand it's possible. Burn the whole bird because you can't make the bird come back alive. Ela mincha, why do you have to throw out the whole mincha? Return it, return the kamitza, take it out of the keli, get it back into the original mincha, and do kamitza in the morning. Why do you have to burn the whole thing? So Hutana Lavu Amalas, Rab Oven, the father of Oven, explained. Since it went into a kli, since you put it into a holy vessel, so automatically the kamitza takes effect. It's called a kamitza. So you can't put it back into the shirayim because then it's all mixed up. So, and even though it's nighttime, a kli could make something holy even if it's not the right time. Is that so? Says the Gemara, Meisve, Kol HaKara B'Yom, Kodesh B'Yom, B'Layla, Kodesh B'Layla, Bein B'Yom, Bein B'Layla, Kodesh Bein B'Yom, Bein B'Layla. So the Mishnah Brisa says that anything that becomes holy during the daytime, it becomes holy during the daytime, and it's nighttime, it's holy at night. Kol HaKara B'Yom, Kodesh B'Yom, B'Yom Ein, B'Layla Layla, B'Layla Loy. From this Brisa, it implies that anything that could become holy, only if you did the service during the daytime does the item become holy. But at night, if you did the service at night, it does not make the item holy. So again, if you did the kamitza at night, why is it holy? Answers the Gemara, ain't a kodesh likarev. What it Bryson means to say, if you did the service at night, you can't bring it onto the mizbeach. If you put this mincha into the vessel at night, you cannot take this kamitza and put it on the mizbeach. But it's still a kamitza, even if it's nighttime, and therefore it'll be puzzle with lina because it's now overnighted. Avokadosh li puzzle becomes puzzle. In fact, that if a tame would touch a B'chusik Kippurim would touch it, B'chusik Kippurim is normally tahar. If he touches it, this thing becomes tame. So Ma'asav Rab Zera asked the question. This is how this came into our mission. Another 2 minutes, and then we'll stop. Ma'asav Rab Zera asked the question. See this alechem v'sabzichem achar Shabbos v'hiktis abzichem v'Shabbos pesula keitzad yasei and chen al Shabbos haba shafila he al shulchan yomim rabim ein bekach klum. Our Mishnah says that if you masada the lechem and the everything on Sunday, don't worry about it. Just leave it for 2 weeks, and then the lechem upon him will be kosher because from the following 2 weeks, it's going to be holy. The Gemara's question is, if already on Sunday, once you put it on the table, the breads are holy. So come Friday night, it should become puzzle with lina. It should become puzzle with lina, because we're saying that even if you put it in too early, it becomes puzzle. It turns out that this was already holy for 14 days. It's already puzzle. Again, it has to be precise. A lechem upon him has to be on the table for 7 days, 7 days and 8 nights. But if you have it there for extra nights, it becomes puzzle, but lina. And our Mishnah says it does not become puzzle, despite being there extra early. And you told me that even if you put something early, it could become puzzle. Rabba said, that's a good question. Avu the Rabbi Nami must need to come up. But Avu, the father of Rabbi Oven, had a brisa. He holds ksava laila ein mekusas mam, hoyam mekusas mam. Beautiful. He says that if you do the kamitza at night, technically that's considered 1 day. So therefore, the kamitza becomes kodesh, even if you did the kamitza at night. But here, if you're putting the lechem upon him 6 days earlier than it's supposed to be on the table, so then it's mechusar zman. It's so missing so much time, it's not going to become holy. So the breads will never become holy. The breads are not holy, even though they were already on the table Sunday. When will they become holy? Friday night. So the Gemara asks the question, okay, soif. When do you say they're going to become holy? We go to Amid Beis. Kimate Laila de Beis Shimshon. When it comes Friday night, they become holy. So the Gemara's question is, Likdosh v'liv soil. Let it become holy and let it become puzzle. Because what's going to happen? It's going to be on the table an extra night. It's going to be on the table 8 days and 9 nights. Because already Friday night, it's on the table. Rava says, the only way it's going to become kosher, again, you put it on Sunday. Come Friday night, you take it off. And then you put it back on Shabbos morning. So then everything is good. That's the eights of the Mishnah. And finally, we'll say, you didn't take it off the table. And even if you didn't take it off the table, it still will be good. Even the Sidra Shloikim Mitzvah, since you already put it Sunday, which was too early, Nasa Kamisha Sidre Kuf, it's as if a monkey did it. So it's as if nobody put it on the table. So it will never really become holy on Friday night. It will become holy only on Shabbos morning when it's supposed to be on the table. So again, the Mishnah, it holds up the eights of the Mishnah, which is that if you put the breads too early on the table Sunday, don't worry about it. It doesn't become pasul. And when does it really, really become holy? It becomes holy Shabbos morning, and just wait another week till the next Shabbos, and then you could eat those breads. Okay, we will pause over here. So the Mishnah says, "Shtei alechem necholos ein pachas mishnayim v'lo yosem mishloisha." The shtei alechem, which was these two breads, right? The two breads of Yom Kippur. So, when were they baked? Sometimes they were baked 2 days before. Sometimes they were baked 2 days before, not less than 2 days, but not more than 3 days. Ketzad. Nefois Erev Yontiv was baked, let's say, Erev Yontiv Shavuos. Nechelas b'Yontiv, it was eaten on the Yontiv L'shtayim. It was the second day after it was baked. Chol Yontiv Lias Achar Shabbos. Let's say Shavuos came out on a Sunday. So then, Nechelas L'shloisha. So they baked it really on Friday. Friday, Shabbos, and Sunday, they ate it on Yom Tov of Shavuos. Lechem aponim, nechal is eaten, ein pachas metisha v'lo le'achad aser. Lechem aponim bread was eaten not less than 9 days, and not more than 11 days. Ketzad, how is that possible? Nefa mer Shabbos, v'nechal b'Shabbos l'tisha. The lechem aponim breads were baked on Friday, and they were eaten on Shabbos. So Friday, Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, until the next Shabbos, that's 9 days. That's a normal. Chol Yantiv Lias Er Shabbos. If Yantiv fell out on Friday, so they baked it on Thursday. Nachol Asara. It was baked on Thursday, and the breads were 10 days old when it was eaten the following Shabbos. Shnei Yomim Shel Rosh Hashanah. Let's say you have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. So Friday and Thursday is Rosh Hashanah, and then you have Shabbos. So they baked it on Wednesday. So then the breads were 11 days old. You don't bake the breads not on Shabbos and not on Yom Tov. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, because you could do it Erev Yom Tov. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Shimon ben Hasgan, Doiches Yom Tov. It actually did override Yom Tov. You could bake it on Yom Tov. The Ein Doicha Yom Tzon, but it can't. If Yom Kippur fell out on a Friday, you would not bake the lechem upon him that day. So it could be normally baked on Yom Tov if Yom Tov came out on a Friday, but if Yom Kippur came out on a Friday, it was not baked. You didn't bake it, the lechem upon him that day. Amar Ravinu said, the Divrei Ha'omer, according to the opinion that says in Masechta Beah, the Dharma and the Doris ain't craving Yom Tov. You can't be makrav a donation on Yom Tov. On Chalamoid, yes, but not on Yom Tov. Don't say midaraisa michse chazi. Don't say midaraisa I could be makrav a neder and a dava that day. Rabbanan hu degazer shlo yisha, and the Rabbanan made exera that the Rabbanan made exera that a person should not be able to be makrav on Yom Tov, in order that a person is going to push it off and say, "Oh, I have time. I'll bring my neder and nedava on Yom Tov." So that why the Rabbanan said. So the whole idea of not bringing nedarim and nedavas on Yom Tov is only a din derabbanan. Don't say that. Ela midaraisa nami lechazer. Midaraisa, you're not allowed to bring any donation and carbon oila nedava on Yom Tov. The ha shtei alechem chayvus hayomhu. Shtei alechem was an obligation of the day. So it always had to be brought on Shavuos or eaten on Shavuos. You can't say, I'm going to push the lechem upon him to bring it on Shavuos. Of course, you want to bring it on Shavuos. Uktani, our Mishnah says, you can't bake it on Shabbos and Yontiv. So even something which is an obligation of the day, if you could do it on Friday, you do it prior. So same idea is Nidarim and Nidavais. If you have an obligation to bring an oil or Nidava, because you made a promise, it's Midaraisa, you can't bring it on Yontif. It's the Din Daraisa, you can't bring it on Yontif, since you could have brought it before Yontif. And it's midaraisa, even and that the proof is from our Mishnah. Hadan Allah shtei halechem. Mitzvah will begin the next parak tomorrow.